Rory, we're looking forward to your keynote at Data Insights by Shoosmiths, our conference next month. But I wanted to take this opportunity to whet people's appetite in respect of some of the themes you might cover. And if 2025 was brought to us by Sesame Street, I think it's probably safe to say that the letters we bring are A and I. The first theme I wanted to look at was timing. Yeah, and you speak a lot about timing in relation to how it could have an impact on people's view of AI. So one of those areas is about this concept of fast feedback. Do you think AI technology is fast feedback? Are we going to see the benefits?
It can be. And where I'm optimistic, and I'm a mixture of an optimist and a sort of realist and a pessimist on this, all three, is that I think it can get you to a better place sooner. I'm not sure it should be entrusted with the last mile.
Right.
I think for a long time, there will be a need for human sense checks. And there's a reason for that, by the way, which is that all decision-making models are context-dependent.
Yes.
And you probably need a human to say, normally yes, but this time it's different. And that would apply to things like medical diagnosis, by the way. It would apply to things like legal decisions, which is, yes, what you've done makes perfect sense given the assumptions you've made. And the assumptions you've made are reasonable in 95% of cases, but there's something here that's fundamentally different.
Yes, and sometimes it can't go wrong. I mean, that's
absolutely.
I
mean, it's very interesting. It's a very interesting theme in police drama that you have. One of the great themes is the conflict between what you might call good cop and bad cop, which is the bad cop goes, no, we've got him banged to rights. He's definitely guilty. Who refuses to deviate from what's called privileging the hypothesis. And then there's the good cop who's going, there's something here that doesn't quite make sense. I'm not comfortable.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, in some ways, I think the fast feedback thing can be very useful, that you can effectively use it as a sounding board, as a stimulus. Another thing it might do, by the way, which isn't altogether bad, is it might restore the balance in decision-making from the over-numerical quantification bias and actually help make decision-making verbal again. So there is something interesting there that does interest me, which is that you generally win arguments within organizations by having a mathematical or economic model. And one of the problems of having a mathematical model is there aren't numbers for a lot of things which are very important. Human emotions would be one, okay? Yeah. How people feel. Yeah, we don't have SI units for regret or anxiety or, effrontery, And consequently, if you have only numerical models doing the decision-making, there's always a danger of quantification bias, that effectively you make important the things that you can count rather than counting the things that are important. So, there are opportunities to be optimistic here. But the fast feedback question is interesting. I always make the point that, for example, if you're a bank, you should draw inspiration from fast food restaurants, because they can learn and experiment and test and learn much, much faster than the bank can. Because, the pace of people leaving their bank is glacially slow. So measuring the effects of any intervention is somewhere between very slow and impossible. So my argument there is see what Amazon does, see what McDonald's does, and see if you can basically copy it, on the basis that if it works in a fast business, it'll probably work in a slow business.
The other area I think that is of a particular interest when it comes to AI is we've got what I call the height of anxiety here, peak FOMO.
Absolutely.
And it's something that's operating in two directions. Organizations are concerned that if they don't adopt AI technology, then they're going to miss out, and they're going to miss their competitive edge. And similarly, there are those that feel that by leaning in fully into AI, that maybe they're going to miss something outside of that. They're going to not take into account what they don't realize is the opportunity cost, per se, of using it.
There's also an opportunity cost, which is an opportunity timing cost, which is, you could argue there are technologies where you're absolutely right to be excited, but you could be too early or too late.
Yeah.
And we don't generally look at the threat of being too early. But if you take some, technology of huge importance, which is electrification, there was a gap of about 50 years. Now, I don't anticipate the gap being that long in this case, but there was a gap of 50 years between people getting excited about the possibilities and really working out how to use it to their advantage. And you could say that what people do at first is they bolt AI onto existing job structures and job descriptions. And the people who ultimately succeed are the people who build the job descriptions around the technology, not applying the technology to the corporate structure. And so obviously changing a company, the structure of the way things work is necessarily slow. And if the gains only really come when we do that, then there is a case for sitting on your hands, I think, a little bit.
And I think it was certainly the case with video messaging. I think when it was introduced, people thought, well, everybody will start. It's text messages, the poorer cousin of video messaging. So now we'll all be sending videos to each other. We'll be speaking live. But
during the pandemic,
people don't really want to have necessarily.
I mean, we shouldn't forget actually that in many ways, I think, and this is always something we're inclined to do, there's a false comparison between the video meeting and the physical meeting. Because if you look at the video meetings you have, most of them would never have happened in the real world, or would have taken 8 months to organise and cost $5,000 in travel costs.
Yeah.
Because one of the people is in the United States or Latvia or whatever. So we shouldn't forget that in global terms, most video meetings shouldn't be compared with physical meetings because it's a false comparison. You should compare it with the meeting that never happened, or the worse alternative, which is an email trail lasting 6 weeks. Which in many cases might have been the alternative to the video meeting.
Right.
So we've got to be quite cautious here. And in AI, we need to also make a distinction between the large language model, which has garnered most of the attention, and the bigger question of agentic AI.
Yes.
There's a company, for example, which did astound me, a company called ASAP, which can effectively automate customer service, not just to the extent of giving you spoken answers, but to the extent of fully actioning customer requests over the telephone using voice recognition, where you would literally say, I'm stuck in a taxi, I need you to rebook me on the 9 p.m. flight because I'm not going to make the 7 p.m. flight. And the voice, there's a pause of imperceptible pause of 57 milliseconds. And then the voice replies, that's fine, I've rebooked you on the 9 p.m. flight and sent you an email to confirm. Now, what's really interesting about that is when you change the interface and the context with which customers deal with organizations, it's unbelievably disruptive. I mean, if you look at a lot of big disruptors in business, and you can go back to the Argos catalog, you can look at EasyJet putting the number of their telephone call center number on the side of a plane before they put the website on.
Yes.
Okay. You could look at, Ocado, etc. You can obviously look at Amazon. Those companies have grown very quickly relative to conventional disruptors because they've effectively changed the context in which the customer interacts. They've created effectively a new marketplace in the consumer's mind.
Yeah.
And it's much faster to disrupt if you do that than if you tackle existing competition head on. So this is, in a sense, exciting for challenger brands, but you might argue it's potentially terrifying for a Google or an Amazon, or a business that owns one mode of interaction.
Yeah.
But is suddenly having to compete with another.
One of the other aspects of agentic AI is how it shifts, I guess, an attitude towards time. And I think we're back to timing again. So call center time is absolutely precious.
Yeah.
So there's a huge...
But now it's free, you see.
Exactly. So it changes...
If you're really intelligent, it isn't free, it's really expensive, but only engaged at key moments. So what you might have, and I wouldn't defend anybody who did this, is call center staff who are paid $100,000 a year, who are really, really good and experienced, whom you bring in whenever the AI can't do the job. So you might actually have a very small call center, and by the way, you will need to have humans, and there's a very important reason why, because it's only through your call center that you realize the problems that consumers have that they can't solve online.
Yes.
And so it's incredibly important. There's a very shrewd person I spoke to who worked at Microsoft for many years, and he put the call center in the middle of the development team because he said, this is where you learn where you're failing your customers. So don't put the call center 3,000 miles away. Don't put it, in a weird sort of shed outside a low-cost city. Put it right in the middle of the development team. So you will need you will need humans, because otherwise you'll never know what the AI is failing to do.
A lot of the observations you make are around being a student of behavioural science, behavioural economics. What do you think that differentiated for you in your business?
It's very good, because it fundamentally makes the point that if you run a business assuming that your clients or customers will operate according to the tenets of conventional rationality or economic theory, or that your clients or customers can tell you in market research accurately and predictively exactly what they will do and why they will do it, okay? Even in combination, those three things are completely inadequate to understanding the value exchange between a business and its customers.
Yeah.
And I genuinely believe that there's actually a link between entrepreneurialism and humour and neurodiversity, by the way. There's an argument, a wonderful person at UCL who says that the reason humans are neurodiverse is because in any group of people, it's vital that you have some people who see the world differently. Because if everybody saw the world the same way, you know that business that happens with ants, where you can get them all walking around in a circle until they all die?
Yes.
Okay. If you had neurodiverse ants, okay, which probably you don't. The ants neurodiversity, I have to say, is outside my wheelhouse. Okay. But a neurodiverse ant, okay, an ant with ADHD would go, fucking hell, we seem to just go around in circles here. Fuck this, I'm going to go off over there, right? And there will be a chance of escape. And there's a wonderful thing which everybody should know about, which is it's actually a universal truth in any complex system, which is there's a thing called the explore-exploit trade-off. And it occurs in animal foraging, it occurs in insect behavior, it occurs in algorithm design, it occurs in, I would argue, how a business should operate, which is that 80% of the business should be exploiting what it already knows, and 20% of the business should be exploring what it doesn't yet know, what it's never known, what nobody has, what is known but nobody's noticed, which is what you might call an unknown known, okay, or what's changed. And in any dynamic environment, there's it isn't really a trade-off. You shouldn't think of it as a trade-off, because the two processes are complementary. You know, the exploitation pays for the exploration, and the exploration tells you what to exploit next. Interestingly, this same scientist I mentioned argues that the reason we have neurodiversity in humans is precisely because of this explore-exploit trade-off. If you had a dangerously conformist society, okay, or you had a society which was measured entirely on exactly the same metrics, and ants over 20 million years of evolution have learnt to indulge the act of exploration. And I think, by the way, if you talked about the future of advertising, I ought to talk about the medium to long-term future, which is that advertising agencies are appointed by consumers, not by businesses. That you actually appoint an agent to not do your shopping for you, except in really banal cases. You might do that with, I don't know, insurance renewal. I hope you don't, by the way, because I think because actually that'll be terrible. It will become a race to the bottom if you're not careful. You know, if your agent just optimized for low price, you'd always end up with a company that did the worst customer service.
Yeah.
But I can see many, many cases where it will be helpful for us to have an agent that compiled a shortlist. And I'm talking to an AI property and relocation company, and one of the reasons they listened to me is they said, when we heard you speak, we realized that at the moment we go out and find properties that meet their criteria. And actually we need to throw in wild cards.
Right.
Because as your wife will tell you, as someone in the property industry, there are a load of people who go, I want a semi-detached house in Beckenham. Okay. And then you show them a lighthouse.
What's the one?
A lighthouse in Folkestone, and they go, finally, that was the one. Okay. And that's probably true of dating as well. I don't think most people end up married to someone who meets their initial criteria, politically, attitudinally, height, whatever it may be. I think fundamentally our active search informs our preferences. So you have to throw wild cards. It worries me that Rightmove doesn't throw in wild cards.
Rory, thank you. We're very glad you do think differently. We're very glad that you are a wild card, and look forward to speaking with you further at the conference.
Oh, can't wait. Thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.